we're talking about thresholds. So thresholds are, especially when we start talking about absolute thresholds, are the absolute minimum stimulus that is required to be reliably detected. And by reliably, I mean 50% of the time plus one more time. Okay, so what is the absolute minimum amount of stimulus needed for us to be able to detect? And all of these things have been studied. It's a field of psychology called psychophysics, where you study the physics of these different stimuli upon our senses. But they're not really that scientific, as you'll see with some of the examples that we're going to show you in just a minute. You've had your absolute thresholds tested during a hearing and vision test. If you remember that from when you were in 10th grade, or if you are in 10th grade back in junior high or in elementary school. But it was, you put the headphones on, you have to raise your hand when you hear the tone. Okay, that's basically testing how small of a stimulus you can reliably detect. And that's what an absolute threshold basically is. So we're going to go through some examples of absolute thresholds. And I want for you to kind of go with me and talk about some of the different things. And I want you to try to guess what some of those things might be. The first absolute threshold that we're going to do is your vision absolute threshold. Now, the test that they did was the light of a single candle burning. How far away do you think you could reliably see a single candle burning? How far?
Probably like 3 feet.
3 feet? All right.
In the dark or is in the light?
Obviously, it's in a dark, clear night.
With or without glasses?
Well, you'd have regular vision. So if you have bad vision, you'd have glasses, and if you don't need glasses, then you don't need glasses. But obviously, if I take my glasses off, I would barely be able to see the candle, let alone it burning far away. Okay, how far? Pretty far. Okay, give me a number and a measurement of distance.
Like 15 feet.
Okay, 15 feet. So we've got 3 feet. 15 feet, miles, inches, feet, yard, kilometers.
I don't think it would go a whole mile.
Okay, 10 feet, 15 feet. Okay, depends on how small. Now, granted, they don't say how big the candle is, but we're to assume that it is a regular candle size. So it's not like a bonfire that has wax around it. It's a candle. And we also aren't assuming that it's like a little tea light. I honestly, this is where it starts kind of being unscientific. Okay. Okay, 15 feet, 10 feet. Okay. The answer, and this is going to be real crazy for all of you because you're completely and totally off, is 30 miles. Okay, you can see the candle 30 miles away.
How are we supposed to see that?
That's possible.
That is possible.
I can wait.
That
I
is
can see
That
that actually. I can see that actually. Now I think about it.
No.
Because you can see a car light from that kind of distance. Well,
Yeah, but
farther
it's
than
car
that.
light.
So if you think about
30
it,
miles?
think about it real quick. You can see a car light from over 30 miles away. So imagine seeing a candle. Obviously, it makes sense.
That is straight
Hey,
cap.
If
But
you
a
were
car
to
light is
put a
brighter.
camera down and then be far away, and you might be able to see the little light, but like if you're using a candle to see, like while you're walking, I don't think you can see that far.
Well,
yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
okay. If
There's
you're trying
multiple car lights.
yes, it would be far more difficult to, one candle isn't going to light up much of a room. But if you're standing on a clear, dark night and somebody has a candle 30 miles away from you, you can reliably detect that candle, which means 50% of the time plus one more time, you will see it. So if you do it 50 times, that means you'll see it 26 times and not see it 24 times. Okay, that's what we have to kind of remember. This is not a you will see it every single time, because then you can it's reliably detect. It's 50% of the time plus one more time. Okay. I understand your reticence to believe that, because 30 miles from Palmdale is Santa Clarita. And if you can imagine seeing a candle flickering in Santa Clarita, obviously the mountains aren't in the way and such, but seeing something that far away seems ridiculous. How is that even possible? Well, again, it's reliably detected 50% of the time plus one more time. Okay.
I don't get what
it
you,
is
I
not
don't
impossible.
get what you are saying when you say 50% of the time plus one more. So 56% of the time you would be able to see it? I mean,
Well, no, not even 56. Again, let's say, for example, you're doing 50 trials. Okay, do you see the candle? Do you not see the candle? You're doing 50 trials. That means 50% of the time, so 25 times, plus one more time, so a 26th time, you can see the candle shining. Okay, 24 times, you might not see the candle burning. But there's 26 times out of 50, which, if we're looking at a grade scale, is still an F, but that's considered the absolute threshold. Again, this isn't tremendously scientific. They did these experiments a long time ago, and we'll get to other ones that are going to sound like even more like just completely vague, but we'll get to that. Okay. So just go with me here. Okay. I'm not the one who did this study. I'm not the one who invented absolute thresholds. I'm just the bearer of bad news. You can see a candle burning from very far away. If there's nothing in the way, and if it's a clear, dark night. If it's in the middle of daylight, obviously you're not going to see the candle. If it's if there's lots of smoke in the air, you're not going to see the candle. It has to be a clear, dark night. Okay. Again, don't shoot the messenger. This is what we've come up with. All right. So the next sense that we're going to take a look at is hearing. Now, how far away do you think you could be from that pocket watch and still hear the ticking? And again, 50% of the time plus one time. So if you do 100 trials, 51 trials, you can hear it ticking, and 49 trials, you can't. 30 miles. Okay, so we're overcorrecting. Or it's the loudest pocket watch of all time.
10 feet.
Okay, 10 feet, 6 feet, 20 miles. 3 or feet, a mile. I'm guessing a lot of you don't have a lot of experience with pocket watches. Yeah. Okay, so a pocket watch is pretty quiet. Okay, it's not a loud sound. It's not like, you can't hear the ticking typically from your pocket. But if you are in a quiet room, okay, you can reliably detect. Okay, you can reliably detect it from 20 feet away. Now, generally, we're doing this in my classroom. My classroom is about 20 feet wide, so you'd be able to hear it from one side of the classroom to the other. But 20 feet is about how far you can hear the little of the watch. Somebody's holding up. And obviously, it has to be a quiet room. It can't be a very loud room. Even if you don't have particularly good hearing, this is average for people. Okay, it's not like, oh, you're amazing at it. Okay, so this is average. Okay, but it is 20 feet. And again, I've had you know, I've had different watches over the course of my life. Some are much louder than others. I'm sure you've had a clock on the wall that you could hear from your bedroom. I hate those clocks. I hate those clocks. Drives me insane. You're sitting there, you're just trying to have a nice quiet time, and then tick, 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 tick. Just make it go away. Anyway, so this is on average, again, and a pocket watch is typically pretty quiet. It's not a very loud ticking sound. Like, never mind, I'm not going to say. I was going to say, if you built a bomb out of it, you probably wouldn't hear the ticking before it went off. But let's not build bombs. Let's build relationships and friendships. Anyway. That's probably for the best. All right, next, smell. How many drops of perfume would it take for you to be able to detect the smell in a small house? And again, when we talk about drops of perfume, I'm talking about from like an eyedropper, not drops from an aerosol can. Okay. How many drops of perfume would you have to be able to smell the perfume in a small house?
80.
80. Okay. 6, 3, 5, 10, 2, 3, 4.
Depends if the perfume is strong or not.
Okay. Again, we're taking averages. So don't, you know, you can get into the minutia of, you know, this one is a far stronger smell. We're just taking averages. Okay. 4, 6. Okay. The correct answer is 1. 1 drop of perfume in a small house. Now, what's a small house? I don't know. And again, this isn't that you can smell it and it smells, oh, that smells really good. It's more like yeah, I think I can smell something. Okay. Yeah, doghouse that's a small house technically. To some people, the house that I am in is a small house. To others, it's a huge house. Okay. So it really depends on what your definitions are. And we don't really have a very good definition. I'm not making you look stupid. I'm making you think. That's the entire point. That's not going to happen, unfortunately. So the fact is that it is a very, very small amount. So why do we need, you know, to sit there and spray in the air after you've destroyed the bathroom? Why do you need to keep spraying to cover up your rancid poo? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, nose blindness. You don't smell it anymore because you've been so used to that aerosol can, okay? So get a new spray. 2, change your diet because you obviously don't agree with whatever it is that you ate, and you probably should have a different thing in your diet, just gonna say. Now, there is new stuff that's come out. I believe they call it Poo-Pourri. It's basically like a spray that you put on the water of the toilet itself. Okay, yeah. This Poo-Pourri basically creates a layer of oil to go on top of the water because it's less dense than water. And what you do is you spray it on there before you destroy the toilet, and then when you release, it goes under the oil, and then it doesn't get out. Okay, so you could technically do the same thing with simple vegetable oil. Of course, it won't smell, you know, good. It'll just not smell horrible. I believe so. That's what it's supposed to. That's why it's supposed to mask it over. You're supposed to spray before you go. Creates that little oil slick, and it keeps the poo particles from going off into the air. Yeah. Yeah. So you've been using it wrong this whole time. Yeah. Well, now you know. And knowing is half the battle. Go, Joe. Anyway, but it doesn't take very much for people to detect the smell. And again, if you're trying to overpower something, it's going to take a lot more, granted. But to just be able to have that scent in the air, it doesn't take that much. unless, of course, you're nose blind to it. Okay. If you don't want to do that, courtesy flushes, always appreciated, especially if you're going to be there for a while. Don't just wait to the end. You can go ahead and go now. Go ahead. I mean, it's wasting water, but you're saving your nose and everybody else's. Anywho. Yeah, that also helps because, again, what ends up happening, if you let's say you destroy the toilet, okay, when you flush, the violence of the flushing actually throws molecules up into the air. So fecal matter is going up into the air. You can't see it, which is really a good thing, because if you did, you'd be absolutely disgusted. But it's basically throwing stuff up into the air, which is why your toothbrush has fecal matter on it. So that's why change your toothbrush every now and again. Okay, because every time you flush, it's throwing stuff up into the air and it's falling down. So closing the lid does help with keeping that down. So, yeah. Yeah. This is where, if I had, $1 million setup, the more you know symbol would come across my head. Yeah. Close the lid. I always close the lid. It's gross. Why would I want people looking in there? Yeah. All right. Next, after smell, taste. How many teaspoons of sugar would it take for you to be able to detect the sweetness of the sugar in 2 gallons of water? How many teaspoons? And remember, teaspoon is the small one. Tablespoon is the bigger one. How many teaspoons of sugar would it take? While you're guessing, I could tell you a little story. Back when I was a kid, one of my specialities in the kitchen was Kool-Aid, because I was a child and that's all I could make. And for those of you who never made Kool-Aid from the packets, the packet is just the flavor, and then you add sugar to it, and then you mix it up. Okay, so I got really good at that because I followed directions easily. Because why would I not? And I remember putting in the packet and two cups of sugar, and it made a quart of Kool-Aid, and it was delicious on a hot summer day. Well, one day, Kool-Aid invented the canisters. And when they invented the canister, my mom bought one and brought it home. And I wanted some Kool-Aid, and that was the only Kool-Aid that was left. So I brought down the canister. I follow the directions on the thing. I pour it in there. I then take 2 cups of sugar and put it in there because I thought you still had to add the sugar. I didn't know the sugar was already in it. I then spent a very long time trying to dissolve that sugar because sugar does not like to dissolve in cold water to begin with, but it does not like to dissolve in cold water if there's already a sugar saturation situation going on. And took a long time of stirring and stirring and stirring, and I eventually got it all dissolved. And then I got a glass and took a sip and gave myself the worst cavity. It was so incredibly sweet. And I will never forget my complete and utter stupidity of putting sugar into something that already had plenty of sugar in it. Yeah, that was bad. Anyway, for this, okay, teaspoons of sugar in 2 gallons of water requires 1 teaspoon of sugar in 2 gallons of water. Okay, we can detect the sugar in 1 teaspoon in 2 gallons of water. So 2 milk jugs worth of water and a teaspoon of sugar, which is really not very much. Okay, doesn't take a lot to detect. I mean, it takes a lot to taste good, but it doesn't take a lot to detect. Okay, the last one, and this one is really unscientific, is touch. Okay, I can sit here and make you guess, but you're not going to be able to guess this one because it's just like, why would anybody do that? This one is you can reliably detect the brush of a bee wing against your cheek. I don't know how they came up with that. They must have said, okay, well, we're going to start with something that's really hard, and then we're just going to get something that's more and more delicate. So like a nail. Yeah, I can feel that. All right. How about lace? Okay, I can still feel that. Here's a bee's wing. Ooh, I don't know. Did I detect that? I honestly have no idea. It makes no sense to me. But that's...
How did they get the bee's wing? Did they just detach it from, like, they killed the bee, detached it, and just used it? Like,
probably, yeah.
Humans are weird.
Yeah, we are very strange creatures. Okay. So the fact is that this is again a showing of how kind of really not very scientific this entire process is. Okay. Did they ask the bee? I'm sure that they did not. Yeah, I'm sure they did not get the bee's consent. We'd like to take your wing.
We kill bugs on a daily basis. That's nothing new. It's just the fact that you killed a bee and then used this body parts to touch someone, not knowing what's on that bee. And it's just like, that's dumb.
Maybe the bee died of natural causes.
So they found a random bee on the floor? Really?
Yeah,
really? That's even worse. They found one on the ground. You know how many times people spit and all kinds of stuff on the ground? Really? Really? That makes sense to you? No, that doesn't. Again, but no.
I am not the one who came up with these. All right, I am not the one who came up with these. But that's what they said. Okay, that's what they said. Now, another threshold that we can actually experience are difference thresholds. And this is the just noticeable difference between one stimuli and another. The two different stimuli can be very, very close to one another. Can you reliably detect the difference between the two? And the question is a one that has been asked a lot of different times. As a matter of fact, one psychologist named Weber created what they called Weber's Law, which basically says that the greater the amount of energy in the stimulus, so the brightness of the light, the loudness of the sound, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the more you need to increase that stimulus to be able to detect the difference. So the reason that I have the volume bars from like a TV set is if you had it at this level, it might take 3 more bars for you to tell the difference in the volume level. But if you put it down to the U, you might only have to add 1 bar to be able to detect the difference in the volume of the sound. Same thing with brightness of light. If your light is very, very bright, it's going to take a lot more energy for you to make that light brighter for you to notice the difference in brightness than something that's very, very dim. Okay. So when we talk about difference thresholds, when we're talking about those just noticeable difference, we also have to talk about people who have genetically a few more sensors in their receptors than normal average people do. We call these people experts. These are people who can see the extremely subtle differences between one color and another. I saw this the other day, and I wish I had saved it so that I could show you all, but it was a post on, I don't know where it was a post on, but it was a picture of different nail polishes all lined up in a row. And the caption said, "My girlfriend asked me to pick which one was the best." And it's all the same shade of pink. Okay. He could not detect that difference between shade A and shade B and shade C. And now the girls are arguing with me. No, but they were all different. Okay. Whatever. Okay. The fact is, he couldn't detect the difference. He didn't have the ability to see the difference in the colors. It's not just men, it's also women too. But, okay, if you have a few more cones in your eye, okay, on your retina, you'll be able to detect those subtle differences as opposed to, well, that's the same color as that one. You can do the same experiment with a series of colors, varying in, brightness. And if you put them into kind of a continuum of color, as opposed to, randomizing them, you won't see a difference between A and B, or B and C, or C and D, but the difference between A and C is obvious. But your brain and your eye can't tell the difference between the two colors when they're right side by side. When you look at A and B, they look like the same color. And when you look at B and C, they look like the same color, but A and C don't look like the same color, okay? People who have a few more cones in their retina, they have the ability to detect that, even A and B sitting right next to one another, okay? There are people out there whose job it is to basically tell the difference between those things. For example, there's a guy who works at the Ben & Jerry's factory in Vermont. He basically gets paid a 6-figure salary, so over $100,000 a year, to taste ice cream all day. Sounds like a pretty cush gig. Well, it is, but he has a few more taste buds on his tongue than the average person does. And so when he tastes the flavors of vanilla, he can tell the subtle differences between the new batch that they just made and the standard batch, which is the one that they're supposed to taste like, okay? Because when we buy a processed food, want it to taste the same from bag to bag, or box to box, or carton to carton. If you got a different flavor of broccoli, you'd go, oh, well, this one was a little bit more ripe. This one was from a different place. You just kind of, yeah, whatever. It is what it is. But if you got a bag of hot Cheetos that didn't taste like they're supposed to, you'd be very confused and dislike them very much, and less likely to purchase them again in the future. So there are people at these manufacturing facilities whose job it is to make sure that they taste exactly the same every single time. And so they can taste it and go, it's missing, it needs more of the hot powder, or it needs a little bit more vanilla, or the creaminess is off on this. We shouldn't sell this to people. Whatever it happens to be, they get to decide where it is because they have a few more taste buds on them, okay? And again, we call these people experts because they can taste the difference between the two, okay? Another place where this comes into contact, or comes into, into existence, is wine tasting. Now, I personally hate the taste of wine. I don't drink wine. I think it's disgusting. It tastes like rotten grape juice, and you're not going to convince me otherwise. I don't know why people like to drink wine. It doesn't make any sense to me. But one of the things that drives me insane is when people who do like wine start going off about the different flavors in the wine. Like, it tastes so amazing, and the intricacies of the flavors are so good. I've had people tell me, well, in this wine, you can taste notes of apple and peach and cherry. And I'm like, it tastes like a fruit salad? That sounds amazing. I'll have a glass. And then I take a sip of it and go, no, that doesn't taste like that. That tastes like rotten grape juice. Well, another teacher who is on board with me on this wine hatred is the English teacher, Mr. Klein. If you've ever had Mr. Klein, you know that he does not stand for any nonsense. And when people start telling him that this wine has tasting notes of this and that, he just kind of shakes his head and goes, you're full of it. Don't talk to me anymore. Well, apparently, a long time ago, he went on like a little trip with some other teachers, and they wanted to stop and do a wine tasting. And this was before he knew his dislike of wine was so strong. And so the person behind the counter who was pouring the wine was talking about black cherry notes and peach and apple and blackberry. And he's like, well, I like all those things. Give it to me. And when he drank it, he just like, you lied to me. This does not taste like any of that. It tastes like wine, and wine is not good. Why did you lie to me in such a way? And they just, oh, ha, 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 you just don't know what you're tasting. No, I know what I'm tasting. I think you guys are insane. And I'll tell you some of the tasting notes that I've actually seen for bottles of wine. People buy the wine because it has these tasting notes. I've seen loam. You know what loam is? It's dirt. They just said, this wine tastes like dirt. Why would you want to eat that? Why would you put that in your mouth? That makes no sense to me. If somebody were to say, hey, we've got a new flavor of Oreo, it's dirt. I'm not buying those Oreos. I'm sure there probably is. Okay? I've also seen leather. Leather? Who's taken their belt off to sit there and gnaw on it because it tastes so good? Ooh, leather. No, I don't want to eat that. Okay. Probably iron deficient. Another thing I've seen, and I'm not making this up, tobacco. It has notes of tobacco. I don't eat tobacco. Why would I want the flavor of tobacco in my mouth? That's gross. But some people absolutely love it, my parents being among them. They basically spent my entire inheritance on wine. And when my parents do someday pass on, what they're going to be passing on to my sister and I is a rather extensive wine collection that is worth nothing. Because it's not fancy wine. It's not wine that anybody wants. But it's wine. I'm hoping I can trade my half of the wine for my sister's half of my parents' house. So, well, you have to wait until you're 21 to try that wine, or have your parents' permission inside the house, nowhere else. But when you're 21, go crazy. No, I have an older sister. But yeah, so if any of you happen to have Mr. Klein as your English teacher, there are a lot of people who wait until they're 21. I mean, I was a couple of months shy, but, you know, drinking contest with your parents. Oh, God, that would be really awkward. I mean, it'd been almost 20 years since I turned 21, and I don't want to have a drinking contest with my parents. Yeah, but that wine is like Manischewitz. That's really not, I mean, it's wine, but it's wine that's kosher wine. It's not really the same thing. It doesn't have very much alcohol in it, as far as I know. I think people who aren't 21 can buy it. I think it's got that little alcohol in it, but I could be incorrect. Okay, so anyway, if you happen to have Mr. Klein before class one day, yeah, before class one day, you know, before anything gets started, you know, turn on your camera and be eating your hot Cheetos or whatever. I can't right now, ZJ.
The child.
That's so big.
It's the child. Can I see the child?
No,
Why?
ZJ, run! Run! There she goes. Anyway, when you're sitting there before class starts with your hot bag of Cheetos, you know, just take a bite of one and then stop and go, ooh, I'm getting notes of hot and black cherry and I'm getting notes of peach in this. This is a very good year for hot Cheetos. And he will most likely tell you to tell me to go do something to myself. But that's why it's funny for me. So. No, ZJ is my daughter. She's 3. No, it's funnier if you do the, ooh, this Oreo has notes of, I've got notes of vanilla, and he'll just kind of glare at you and tell me to do something to myself. She's not that sticky, not usually at least. Anyway, so the fact is that these difference thresholds and these absolute thresholds, for some psychologists, are complete and total garbage. They have instead decided that signal detection theory better explains how we knit our sensory information into a sensation more completely. Yeah, it's best if you don't ask. So, sensory detection theory basically says that we can all become experts at a sensation, whether it be taste or touch or sight or smell, whatever. What it takes is experience. Number one, experience is key, because as you gain experience through tasting something or smelling something or what have you, you can start to detect smaller and smaller differences from one to another to another. Okay, so there is no such thing as an absolute threshold to a person who is a believer in signal detection theory. There is no difference threshold. It comes down to experience. Okay, it also comes down to motivation. Okay, so how motivated you are to detect that difference between the two things. And it also comes down to fatigue. So how tired you are while you're doing this. A good example of this would be a person who is who works in the air traffic control industry. Okay, air traffic controllers have to keep track of airplanes and where they are and how close they are to one another and where they're going. There's a lot of things that they have to be keeping track of. And typically, airliner accidents only take place, especially if it has anything to do with the air traffic controller's fault, at the end of that air traffic controller's shift, or if that person is very, very tired. Okay, it takes a lot more paying attention, and they're just exhausted and they can't do it. So it makes it so that they get into plane crashes, a little bit more often. Okay, so signal detection theory basically says there is no such thing as any kind of a threshold, and that if you're experienced in it, you have motivation to it, and you're not tired, you will be able to detect smaller and smaller and smaller stimuli. Okay, so absolute thresholds get thrown out the window along with difference thresholds. Now, where would I stand? Well, I understand the ideas of the signal detection theory, but I also think that on average, a normal average day, if you're not really paying attention and you don't have a lot of experience, I think those thresholds do make a lot of sense, because there is going to be a baseline of, do I detect that molecule of sugar as it passes past my tongue as I'm drinking this, sugared water? Maybe, maybe not. It all depends. So that is basically that. Let me stop that.